This is a simple, intuitive method that I teach all of my master coaches because it is reliable, it is very easy, and yet very powerful. And I've used it in my own career as a life coach, as a business coach, as an executive coach, and as a mentor for close on 35 years. Because I've been teaching since the age of 17. Reluctantly at first, I must say, and eventually with a lot of gratitude. So this simple method has been there from the beginning. It's evolved in the sense that my appreciation for it has deepened. And when I've seen how it has been incorporated into so many lives in so many different ways, I can't not teach it. In fact, my recent cohort, this again was a big favorite with our life coach modules. So here is my ABCs, Somatic Awareness Intuitive Coaching Method. So I'm going to give you 3 case studies. These case studies are near and dear to my heart because they were the ones that really highlighted, wow, this method doesn't just work for me, it really makes a difference in the lives of other people in extraordinary ways. The first standout was a client who was a CEO of a large financial institution, and she was quite a feisty character, a wonderful, wonderful woman, a leader at the highest level. And I taught her this method because I was teaching intuitive skills to this group. And as a leader, she wanted to incorporate some of my tools and teachings into her work, and she was also learning them for her personal growth. I had no idea that she would use the ABCs in this way. So just before I conclude the story, you get into it, you're wondering maybe what does ABCs stand for? ABCs stands for attention, in the body, in the center. And over the last few years, I've added an S at the end, not only as a plural, but as a little clue to remind us that once we put attention in the body, in the center, and we move attention out of the busy mind, that we have the opportunity to share with our ABCs running. We also have the opportunity to stay, not as a forced make ourselves put our attention, but as a gentle invitation to keep bringing attention back. I've also discovered there's a bit of science, yes, more alliteration, okay? Like it's a coal thing, right? That there's some science I've discovered over the years to back up why ABCs works. And I didn't know that in the beginning. So let's finish the case study. So this woman is attending classes and she tells us the story the one day that she now has used the ABCs. She's telling us and she says, Cole, she says, I had to give a presentation to over 200 bankers and financiers from around the world. And normally I would just, in my own way, step up and stand up and just give them the facts, give them the data, and in quite a direct way, sort of take it or leave it. So she had this whole PowerPoint presentation. She says just before she walked out in front of the group, she says, I did my ABCs. She took a moment, really just does take a moment once you get used to it. And she drew her attention into the felt sense of her body. And now what that means is it's not a visualization. It's not picturing. It is simply the felt sense, the somatic. Soma means of the body. The felt sense of the body, the same way we would notice if we were hungry or not, the same way we would notice the temperature of the room, the same way we would notice our center of gravity so that we didn't fall over if we were skiing or standing on one leg. So she took a moment because when we put our attention in our bodies, although that sounds like the most simple thing to do, it turns out that we support our nervous system from shifting from a sympathetic nervous system dominance to a parasympathetic nervous dominance. And if you know what that means, sympathetic nervous system is the stress nervous system. It's like the accelerator pedal on the car. Whereas the parasympathetic nervous system is our rest and digest nervous system. It's how we push the brake pedal. And even 2 minutes of somatic awareness, of putting attention in the body, can help our nervous system kick out of that hyper drive that we all tend to have too much of, because obviously both sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems have a role. Anyway, so she did this. I also have noticed, and this of course is less scientific, but I've noticed for myself that I couldn't access intuition without my ABCs. And I could not be discerning about whether the thoughts in my head were intuitive guidance or whether they were in fact just me making up stuff or wishful thinking or ego or arrogance or fear. But there's something about ABCs, and I've heard this from countless students, that it's like you get quite real with yourself. You get quite honest. And if you're talking from your ABCs and listening from your ABCs, it's also true. So she did her ABCs. She walked out in front of the audience, and she says, staying in her ABCs, she could really feel a connection to the audience. And I've heard this from countless coaches that I've trained as well, that somehow when we do our ABCs, we do feel more connected to each other. We don't feel this separate, invisible wall between a you and me, an us or them, you know? And she says, so now she's standing there and she realizes this knowingness that the presentation she's created is completely not what she wants to do. So she switches off her PowerPoint, which you can imagine, pretty radical. And then she says, Cole, I just spoke from my heart. I just spoke. Now she still did the data. She still knows her stuff, right? She's still an expert in her field. But she spoke from the heart. And she says now, this part made me nervous, I will say, because she said at some point she thought, Cole, I realized all they want is love. And I'm like, gosh, please don't tell me. You didn't tell them. Because it's still business, right? It's still a business environment. That's just also me. Quirky Cole, I suppose. But she didn't say that. She felt that. And it's true, right? We can do hardcore business. We can step up. We can put boundaries in place. We can do all of that, but still have this deeper wisdom and this deeper knowing guiding from whence our action comes. So she's standing there. She realizes this. She delivers her talk. And then she tells us, Cole, they gave me a standing ovation. And she says, that doesn't happen in my world. That doesn't happen in that industry. And somebody came up to her afterwards from the UK, and apparently what she says, he said to me, I came here today to shut down your project because it was a pilot project. But after hearing you speak, I'm leaving your biggest supporter. And that's ABCs. I've also sat with a professional golfer who was at risk of losing his professional card, to be able to play in international tournaments. And I thought, gosh, here I am coaching a golfer when I really don't know much about golf at all. But I do know something about ABCs. And through our discussion, I realized that he used to have a natural ABCs running and somehow had lost it over the last few years. So that, in combination with some Enneagram conversation, which we won't go into now, let's check my other videos out. Lots of great videos on the Enneagram. And just really asked him good questions, helped him realize that he used to have something that he lost, and then mentored him in reconnecting with his somatic awareness as a tool to manage his stress in this high-stakes professional sporting environment. And it played a role. He won his next tournament. The last case study is a little bit of a different one, and it's an older case study in my early years. I had a client who employed several people, and the one day she phoned me and said, Cole, she's one of my employees, basically stole my car for the weekend. Now, it was a company car, but still without her permission, had gone on some joyride and had damaged the car. And she didn't know what to do with this young woman because she showed potential. She really was hoping that it would work out. So she sent her for coaching, which is kind of the worst. Well, it's one of the most challenging things as a coach, to be sent someone. And so this young woman is sitting in front of me, and everything about her body language, never mind her body language, she is shut down. Her tone is hostile. Her eyes are rolling. Her arms are folded. She is not wanting to be there. And I'm coaching her and I'm asking her questions. And about, I don't know, 5-10 minutes in, I was thinking to myself, no, I'm not doing this to myself, because I was really pushing water uphill. So I said to her, look, and I put down my pen and paper. I said, look, it's very clear to me that you don't want to be here. I could be wrong. You can tell me if I'm wrong. Happy to be wrong. But what's really going on? I was like, let's get real. Now I'm doing my ABCs. Now, the thing about ABCs is I actually believe over all these years, it's our natural state. This is where we are the most authentic and natural. And I also believe that when we are in our ABCs, we do put out a bridge that most people cross to also get real with us and to drop into their own intuitive knowing, etc. But every now and then, not. So she looked at me and she softened a little bit, and she almost panicked, and she said, oh. Because I said to her, look, if you want to call it today a day, we don't need to do this. And I think she realized, gosh, she's going to get in trouble at work. She's already in trouble at work. And I said, look, if you want to be here, tell me one reason that you might want coaching, not for your employer, but for you. And she looked at me and she looked up and she said, I really don't know. So I said, well, may I try something with you? Can we just experiment a little bit? And if it doesn't work, and if this is still really not for you, I really respect that. And I'm going to shake your hands and I'm going to wish you well, maybe refer you to some colleagues of mine, because perhaps therapy is a better road for you, etc. So she said, all right, she's willing. And I just invited her to put her attention in her body, in the center, and hang out there a moment. And I think the reason this particular case study sticks out of many, many years, decades actually, of using this work is because it was so surprising. Because the first thing she said was, oh my gosh, I'm really hungry. I mean, it sounds weird, right? But she said, I'm really, really hungry. And then she admitted she hadn't eaten in 2 days. She was so disconnected from her body and from her body awareness that she had not noticed how hungry she was. She was living in the loft. She was living up here in the mind. So I invited her just to be quite present with her body's reality and her body's sensation. And then the good news is that the conversation changed and it became meaningful and it became real and it became valuable. So those are just 3 little examples of, I believe, how this method can serve. What I suggest you do, or let's say invite you to do in a real coaching style, is I invite you to experiment with what happens when you put your attention in your body in the center. If you do have permanent residence in the mind, it might take a bit of getting used to. If you do have permanent residence in the gut and, well, in your body's sense, it may be worthwhile to compare what changes. And this is literally an exercise that I always include in my life coaching modules as part of my ICF Master Coach certification. And every time a group practices this, I hear the most incredible things. Even last night, when teaching this to people around the world, I heard things like, I feel like now when I did my ABCs, I suddenly was really connected. I was really listening. I wasn't distracted anymore. I wasn't thinking about what to say next. I could be more authentic. The conversation got real. We started getting emotional. There was even some really tender emotions that showed up in, and I'm getting goosebumps, in 5 or 10 minutes of conversations with ABCs. And one young woman actually was so blown away. She said, normally, for some reason, talking online with screens makes her really anxious. She always feels very separate to the people she's talking to. The screen is always a barrier, and it triggers her anxiety. She's, for the first time, by doing her ABCs, the anxiety went away, and she was able to have a conversation online where there was a real sense of warmth and connection. So that was the first time I'd heard that. So what I suggest you do is you compare, putting your attention above your shoulders, just noticing the mind, and then putting it into the body. Like, slow down a bit. You may have to consciously slow down if you want to use awareness of breath for a moment. Not deep breaths, but slowing down the breathing, that can help. Another thing that can help, strangely, is to just drop your eyes slightly. It's a bit of a neuroscience trick, let's say, that when your eyes dip, you tend to be more aware of the kinesthetic felt sense in the body compared to looking up, which tends to access visual, and left and right tends to access audio. It's like a brain wiring synchronicity, or just something interesting about how the eyes are linked to the way we access data. So the looking down can help. And really, just, I would suggest, don't think of this as a task. Think of this as an experiment, a little bit of an experiment. Like, what happens when I put my attention in my body for my own nervous system? What happens when I take a moment and put my attention in my body when I'm writing an email, when I'm giving a speech, when I'm holding space for someone, when I'm leading a meeting? What happens when I do this, when I'm coaching myself, when I'm meditating, when I'm being more mindful? It's a great mindfulness tool, by the way. So it's just 2 minutes, easy peasy. I suppose it takes a bit of practice, but it's not rocket science, right? And I really hope that it serves you as much as it has served me and the many people that I serve.